Emma Thieme. So let's jump in. So Emma and I met not too long ago. Emma is originally from the East Coast and made her way to the little beach town of Cayucos. And I thought what was really, really interesting, we don't share these stories enough, is someone who started with a very creative background and tapped into the creative to launch and start her business, and became, is successful successful at doing that, and has had a really, really interesting journey. So we're going to dig into that today. Thank you for being here this morning with us.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah, thanks to everybody. Thanks for coming.
So let's jump in. So you're creative at heart. Tell us about that path in your life and the very start of it all. We have a couple of pictures we're going to show, and you brought some examples of some of the work you've done.
So going way, way back to my childhood, my mom always had my sister and I doing creative things. She taught us how to sew really young, so young that I don't remember not sewing. So we did it all the time. She made all of our clothes. I would design with her. We would choose patterns together. I would kind of tell her what I wanted different. And we made so much together. And I just it was such a big part of my life that when it came time for me to leave home, I'm from a very small town. It's actually a village in Maine called Winterport, and it's on a river. So we were very insular people. Winter comes and we spend so much time indoors doing things. And eventually it came time for me to go to college. I brought a sewing machine with me. I just would sew on my bed with my I would use my hand to operate the foot pedal if I didn't have a table. And it was a part of me and I never questioned it. And then eventually it kind of took over my life. But these are pictures of my first workshop. This one, you can see that it's not insulated. I was using this foam here to try to block out the wind because the wind would come right through these boards. Behind me, there's foam dust from sculpting a motorcycle seat. And then over here, I have a finished motorcycle seat and I'm sitting on wood that I stacked, chopped, and then that was my wood stove. And the one over to the far left, your left, was taken on International Women's Day, which today is. So yeah, so I thought that was kind of great awesome to show. And then this centerpiece is what the outside looked like. So if you can imagine, and then up there is directly outside of the studio. So these are really my beginnings with Maven. This is where Maven started. And as you can see, the climate's changed a little bit, the environment's changed, but this is always inside of me and inside of what I've started. These are my roots.
And you brought one of your seats.
Yeah.
So this was your first sort of business endeavor.
Well, I guess going way back, this is the seat. This is for a 1960s era Triumph Bonneville, if you're familiar with bikes. And this is what the seats really grew into. This is when I don't have any rules and I can do something on my own.
It's so beautiful. Yeah. It's so beautiful. I don't know if you guys can see all the detail and the studs, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah, this is my plant dyed leather, which we can get into a little bit later, but I discovered naturally dyeing on leather for myself, and I've really continued that with my practice. But they started out much simpler than this, and I've kind of taken everything just steps further over the years, especially as I'm able to get more freedom, artistic freedom with my clients. I can really jump into some really kind of crazy off the wall stuff that we might not normally see with leather work, which is a very traditional art form. It's based on a lot of rules, and I just try to kind of challenge all that, I guess. But my first enterprise with leather was actually leather earrings.
Oh, right. Yes.
And I would cut all these different shapes and just put all these colors together. And there's this space that in Cayucos where it started. You have to come and see finished result, but yeah, there are a few slides in probably. I think they're kind of random, but they're just
The
like
earrings.
little triangle earrings, and I would sell those to friends right there. That's plumbing chain. This is, so this is a good representation of kind of what I was used to at the beginning. I would just set up my table with my leather work kind of anywhere, and sell earrings. And I was just kind of used to doing that. And then eventually it led to the trip where now I'm selling full leather goods. This was in Pacific Beach in San Diego. This was in Tucson. So yeah, things evolved.
So did you start doing the custom seats before the earrings were first?
The earrings were first. That was
Okay.
just me kind of learning to cut the leather by hand, which is, I really owe a lot to. I didn't realize it at the time, but using the scissors is such a skill, especially with leather. We're used to kind of using a knife or stamping it out. And because I was coming from a seamstress background, I was really comfortable with scissors. So I think that allowed me to kind of experiment with all these different shapes and become very confident with my cutting skills. And then so the earrings eventually evolved into me experimenting with sewing with the leather. And then I got my first motorcycle in 2013. And it was my first street motorcycle. And if you're familiar with bikes from like the 80s, the seats are so, they're just ridiculous. They're like huge sculptures of foam. And if you're a small person, it makes it even difficult to ride because you can't touch the street. So I immediately wanted to change the seat. And that's where the earrings and the leather and the sewing all kind of came together, because I realized, well, can I just make this myself? And so I went and got some vinyl and I practiced and
So hang on, were you a biker? Is that what?
Yeah.
So you did, so that was part of it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, okay. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, no, I'm like, there's so many different directions the story could go in. But yes, I started with dirt biking, and then eventually I wanted to get on the road. So I got a 1980 Honda CM 400, which is like a fun vintage bike, and it's a 400cc. And I had that around. At that time, I was living in Portland, Maine. And so I just kind of bopped around on that, but I made the seat. I didn't want to ride it until I made the seat for it.
So you were just making the seat for yourself for that bike.
That was my first,
that was your first
ever seat. That was my kind of first epiphany, was making the seat for myself, realizing how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And then trying to research and see who else did it.
Well, that was my next question. Was there anyone else out there that made custom leather seats for,
not in
to the point, at this level?
No, I've never seen, not to like toot my own horn, but I'm like, I've never seen anything like
yeah,
that
no,
before.
yeah.
But typically in the motorcycle leather world, which I wasn't necessarily part of, I just love to ride. I mean, I love riding my motorcycle. But usually you see a lot of the Western style or flames and skulls. And so there's a very typical traditional style of the art form that's kind of persisted over the years. So that was around to some degree. I probably would have had to go online to find somebody to do it. Nobody really around locally. And then that prompted me to be like, okay, well, if I wanted to learn this, who would teach me? Is there a school? And there was barely a school. I found a little for-profit intensive program in New Jersey, and it was a custom auto upholstery program for 6 weeks. And I pretty much completely impulsively signed up for that course and moved to New Jersey. And from the time that I looked at it on
auto upholstery.
Yeah. And I was just like, this is going to give me a bread and butter trade. And I knew that at the school, we were only going to work with vinyl. But because I was so comfortable with sewing already and so comfortable with leather already, I knew that everything they were going to teach me, I was going to be able to apply to the knowledge that I had been gaining with so much momentum ever since I was a kid. So I went there and I was the only girl in the whole school. And I just like sewed up a storm. I was obsessed with it. It was like 5 days a week. On the weekend, I lived with a woman. I rented a room off Craigslist. Luckily, it went okay. I like lived with her. And then on the weekends, I would go into New York City and just walk around and look for fabric and just really immerse myself in the industry of professional sewing for the first time.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. So you started, and so okay, you ended the school program. At what point did you realize this could be a business? I could custom make these for other customers, and how do I get my name out there? And how do I even start? Was that your mind frame after graduating from the program?
Yeah, I mean, it was there before. It was there as soon as I tried to make that first seat. It was like, this is a niche. Like, I can do this. I'm my first one, not so great, but it's like, I know what to do next time already. And so I really wanted to give myself that trade right from the beginning. And before that, I was working in the writing and editing industry. I have a BA in journalism. So that's kind of the career path I was taking. I was serving, working at restaurants super consistently, and then writing and editing on the side. And it was just kind of like, that's so personal to me. Like, for writing is such a personal art form. And this was one where I could really just kind of go, if that makes sense to people. It wasn't such a like bleeding out on the page or whatever. It was just like working with color. So I really wanted to kind of almost do a career switch and go into something that was going to be more in the artistic, more design realm. So.
And when you felt that niche need for this product, custom product, is it because people had seen your bike and asked you about it? Like, what was it? Were biker friends asking you for seats as well? I mean, how did you get that? How did you get affirmation of that intuition? You know, that this was the way to go.
Well, when I was in school, or in the program, the upholstery program, I started an Instagram for my work, and I would tag like custom motorcycle seat. And pretty much from the time that I was in school posting photos, I was getting interest in purchasing one. And so that kind of gave me the moment. I feel like with me, I'm very I do so much intuitively. So I just felt compelled to do it. And I knew that it would work if I kept working at it. And I was confident with my style and my skill level. So I think that honestly, my intuition kind of gave me the confidence to keep going. After I graduated from the program, I immediately went on a trip. I drove my 99 Ford Ranger to Mexico from Maine and back, and that took 2 months. And I set up an email address for the motorcycle seats before I left, and I was getting emails the whole trip. And so by the time I got back, on the way back up to Maine, I stopped in Portland, Maine, and I picked up my first client's seat, and I took it back to my mom's sewing studio and made the seat. So it kind of just started from there, like right out of school, really.
And at that point, is that when you knew this would be a business? Or was it going to just be a creative outlet while you kept doing these other jobs? Or, what was like, no, I'm going to turn this into a business. Was that from then on? Was that already the intention?
Yes, definitely. And in school, they were definitely teaching us how to make it a business. And so we were learning alongside, like, well, how do you work in this industry?
Right.
What's the industry like? And that was a part of the education. So I was realizing that if I want to keep doing it efficiently, I need to make relationships with suppliers. I need to be a business so that I can buy wholesale materials. And so I was really kind of going into it as like, this is a way that I can fund my creative outlet, and people are interested in it.
Oh, that's awesome. So you started making the seats. You did that for a while, and then at some point in time, you decided to pack up everything and drive across country. So, what happened there? What was the impetus for that?
So I was doing the seats. The seats would, I still had my other jobs as well. I was still serving, I was still writing and editing, and I was also doing the seats. And then the seats would go really hard during the winter times because that's when people would kind of hang up their bikes for the winter and try to get their seat done in that time. So I would stack up tons of projects to take me through the winter. And then by the end of that, I would be like, oh, I just need to make like a purse or something, or just something kind of different than a motorcycle seat. So I would use all my scraps and remnants from those projects, and then my very newfound skill set in building patterns from scratch around curved motorcycle seats to create bag designs. And then I would take all those back. Eventually I had so many, I'm like, well, I got to start selling these. Like my friends were buying them. And then I started to look into fine art and craft shows, and I just kind of followed that circuit. So it would be kind of like a reprieve. The bags would be a reprieve from the motorcycle seats, and then vice versa once the winter hit. So I would take the summer and spring and fall and travel around to craft shows selling this completely different form of leather work. And then I would kind of retreat to the shop, do the seats again.
Oh my gosh.
And then that eventually, the bags kind of started to really, I started to need to make them in the winter time. And then I didn't have so much time for the seats. And eventually that led me to take it fully on the road. I had traveled down to shows in Nashville and kind of up the East Coast a little bit, doing art shows. And I really liked that. I really liked kind of vagabonding in my van and just kind of having a bunch of lumber and setting it, all the displays up, and like kind of being on the road that way. So eventually, I needed to kind of get out of my little town that I was living in and go out. And I just kind of did that pretty spontaneously. And that trip, unbeknownst to me, I wasn't looking for a new place to live, but it kind of opened up my eyes to how far I could go with the craft.
Mm-hmm. And so with the purses, did you know right out the door that, okay, this is going to be more of a high-end, I mean, maybe not a luxury item, but definitely a high-end item? Sometimes I feel like you had this notion that you were already going to start at a certain level of quality and pricing and certain types of shows, like just more high-end shows rather than the local farmers market. So did you already know that, okay, I'm going to hit that level out the door?
Yeah, I think that with the seats, that was a great kind of entry point into the bags for me, because I was taking very good track of my time, and because every project was highly custom, I needed to create it for this specific motorcycle and this person riding it. I was already kind of into this price point where it's like they're paying for an hourly wage, they're paying for the cost of leather, and this is how much time it took, this is how many materials, this is the cost. I can't argue with the cost. I took that same approach with the bags. Every bag tends to be completely different. And I really keep track of how many hours is it taking me to create this? How expensive is the hardware? How expensive is the leather? And the truth is that leather cannot be a custom leather artful piece. It cannot be under a certain price point. So I think that's been a long time coming to be confident with my prices, but falling back on that structure really helps me. And then with that, it's like, okay, well, where are those people? I have to, and there's been these fine art and craft shows running. There's certain ones that have been around since the 70s, the 60s, and I really kind of gunned it for those ones because I wanted the clientele that had been very loyal to these show producers for many years to come. And then it was the first show that I got really just honored to be accepted into was one from back home called the Common Ground Fair, and it's a totally organic agricultural fair. It's kind of interesting, but their art program is very prestigious. You've got to make everything yourself. You have to have a very intense focus on sustainability and the natural elements of your craft. They're very selective. And I got into that the first year that I applied. So that kind of gave me just the confidence that it's like, you are at this level of fine craft. And you should be applying to those. And that's where when you do the shows, you're investing so much in the booth, getting yourself there at the displays all the time. And it's just a huge risk. It's a huge risk of your time and money. So I would definitely recommend to artists and people who are doing the show circuit, it's a great way to get your name and build your clientele, to go for those shows that, you know, the booth fee might be very expensive, but they're bringing in that level of clientele that's going to connect you. I have people who still buy my work who met me at a show back in 2018 in Northampton, Massachusetts, or something like that. Like, I still have those initial clients that have really supported me through different price ranges, supported me also through different color palettes. Like, their bag, the first bag they bought may have been just an all brown kind of plain bag, but now they look like this. And I'm so happy and lucky to have people that continue to support me.
I'm just in awe that you, again, I don't know if it's your intuition but you knew the market. You knew you had to be where your market was, and you had a specific idea of what that market is, the people that you want to that are your potential customers, and zoning in on it like that is just, it's so impressive, because I think for a lot of people it takes lots of testing and trying to figure out, you know, there isn't always an obvious way to access the right market out the door.
I know, and that's been a journey for me to kind of come to terms with that myself, because I do see other people and they're building their business and they're pains going over every single detail and they're waiting to launch, and I'm like, oh, I didn't do it like that. Like, I just kind of just went out there. Does this work? Okay, I'll change that. I listened to my customers, I listened to my clientele, and they helped me change, and we all kind of got into the dirt together to see what makes a good purse, something that I never really thought that I would spend so much time and effort on, but I'm so glad that I do, because it's such an interesting object that we carry every day. And it carries our important things, and it's baggage that we carry on our bodies, and it needs to represent us and work for us. And I think with that too, like, I love to fall back on, if anyone's familiar with Bruce Lee and his philosophies, he has a phrase that he used all the time, which is the way of no way. And it's just the ability to kind of let yourself be free, not be confined to rules and tradition. And that really appeals to me, because it's just like, I need to figure things out for my own. And even going back to when my mom was teaching me how to sew, we were different sewers. I couldn't use a pattern, and she went meticulously by the pattern, which instilled a very good work ethic in me. But at the same time, like, that wasn't how I worked, but I could still be meticulous in being free. So I try not to get too hung up on, like, I don't know
the rules. Totally. They're just awesome. I mean, that's I think that's definitely a mark of a great entrepreneur. It's like, okay, there's a framework, but I'm not going to go by the rules. But everything you described is really interesting, because that's how we teach our tech startups. It's like, do the MVP, like the minimum viable product, test it, see what the market says and adapt, test it, see what the market says and adapt. And I guess you had that exposure through the market, through the craft shows that you went to, and hearing you say listening to the customer is so important, right? And not just say, no, this is how I'm going to do it, take it or leave it. It's like, no, you're putting a product out there. It needs to connect with your customers. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you do the shows, if anybody out there has done a craft show, a lot of it is just kind of sitting in your booth with everything that you spent so much time making and creating, listening to people come in and say, I would buy this if it had 3 more pockets. Or like, I would buy this if, and I was like, oh, okay, but thank you.
I only spent 100 hours making this one first. Oh, yeah. So then you started, so you were out on the road quite a bit on these shows. At some point you decided to move to the West Coast.
Yes.
And was that part of just trying to explore the boundaries, explore new markets? What was the impetus for that?
That was another pure intuition, kind of spontaneous move. I found myself, I wasn't even planning to come to California, to be honest. I had to do a show in Tucson, and then I just kind of had left myself some time and to trickle around, just kind of move around. And then I realized that I could book some shows, some kind of craft farmers market style shows up the California coast. So that's what I did. And between a show in LA and a show in San Francisco, I came to the Central Coast just on a total whim. My friend was like, you should check out this little surf town, Cayucos. And I didn't have anything to do between that time. And I honestly was a little bit like feeling like, what am I doing? Like, I'm so far from home. Like, I'm just kind of going, not particularly like hitting it big at any of these shows, but just kind of meandering around. What's my purpose here? And pretty much at that same thought, I arrived in Cayucos and I got out of my van in a parking spot that I literally look out onto now at my shop.
That's great.
And I went into this store called the Cayucos Collective, if anybody's been to Cayucos and checked this store out. And it's filled with local art and artists. And just immediately I felt, I made conversation with the people in there, and I made conversation with people in the town. And on that day, just the town kind of just swallowed me up a little bit and welcomed me. And I continued to meet other artists. And I went to San Francisco to do the show, but then I came right back down because I felt comfortable. And then the pandemic hit. I made it all the way to Portland, Oregon, and I could either book it across the country to Maine or stay and see what was going to unfold. And I decided to stay because I had grown up in Maine. The town that I had moved here from was a very small town. It was population like 600. I had started a little store in that town too. But I needed a change, and there's something about the Central Coast that really just kind of made me feel like it was a home. And so I decided to stay.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it worked out.
I know, me too. Yeah.
So here's the store in Cayucos.
Yeah. So it looks so different than this, but I wanted to show the beginnings. That I rented this space in September 2020. I came to Cayucos in March 2020. Stayed for several months, went back to Maine for the summer to reopen my store there and see if I, where I should be. And so but I left my van and my dog over here. So I knew I would have to return to see choose between these two places. And I chose here. So I rented this space in September 2020. It had this like blue carpet, plaster walls, no ceiling, and we brought it to with the help of the community. So many people were completely willing to help. We sanded these floors, pulled up the carpet, pulled up the subfloor, sanded them. The original hardwood floors are underneath. And this is how it started. I had a cutting table in there. There might be another slide, I can't remember, but of the full. Okay, yes. And then it turned into this. So, and I just kind of hung my work on the walls. I had everything that I brought with me on the trip and didn't sell. But it was very humble. And I haven't taken a photo of it recently. It's nothing like this. I mean, there's people in the room who have been in the store and can say that it's totally different, and you should just come check it out. That was going to be my little hook, is you just got to come check it out.
Good hook. So you launched, and so you made it through so how did you make it through the pandemic? That must have been rough. I know for a lot of retail, it was a really rough time.
Yeah, so that was rough because at that point I was heavily dependent on the show circuit. And the last show I did was in San Francisco, pretty much the same week of March 2020. And then shows started getting canceled. And I had the intention of going all the way up to Portland, Oregon, and potentially renting a space and doing shows there. They have some really great craft shows. But by the time I made it up, it was day one of the lockdown. The entire city had shut down. And I was like, oh, shoot, what am I going to do now? So I had a website. I was able to kind of make do with the clientele that was very loyal to my work. They kept me going. I also knew I still had the store back in Maine that was shuttered for the winter because it was it's so hard to describe how small this town was. Like, it didn't have a coffee shop. There was literally nothing there except my store, some antique stores, and people would be like, oh my goodness, like it was a hidden gem, which was cool. I love to create that effect, the hidden gem of a spot. But so I just kind of, honestly, I just kind of pushed through somehow, heavily worried about money. Went back to the store in Maine, reopened it, kind of struggled through, and used credit cards, if I'm being honest. And then came back to California, rented the space, and was like, I have to open. Like, it was a big race to open. I need to get in there. I need to start making things. I knew that as soon as I started to create, then the funds would come back to me. So it was really all just still that kind of intuition and confidence of like, if it's up to me, it will happen and it will work. So I just need to put everything on my own shoulders. And as soon as I can create, then I'll get back on my feet again. So it was a big rush to really kind of get the space to at least this point. And now it's a completely different space. I've acquired more space in the building. I just feel so grateful for how it all turned out. Yeah.
So it's becoming more and more of a formal business in some ways. Do you feel that impedes in any way on your creative side, or is there any, I think some creatives worry about, when is it, too much of a business and the creative side isn't as relevant anymore, and then you're losing touch with that. Is that ever a concern? Do you ever feel frustrated with that part of it?
Yes, that's a huge mystery in my life, is how to find that balance.
The balance, yeah.
It's very, very difficult because I don't have an MBA, and I didn't study business. And so now I find myself in this position where I have something and it's continuing to gain momentum, and I need to figure out, well, how do I keep this and how do I allow it to grow, when at the end of the day, I'm an artist and I just want to be in my studio making my leather creations. So I've fallen back on my communication skills that I learned with my degree. That really helps me kind of navigate this professional world. But it's really, that's been difficult. It's been difficult to find the balance, but I'll go through spurts. Like with my creativity, it's like, And if anybody is an artist out there, they might relate to this, but I feel these waves, and I'll be on a wave where I'm like, I'm really into this color palette, or I'm really into dyeing and I can't wait to work with the leather, and that will kind of build over a month and I'll be extremely productive. And then the technology side might kind of fall to the wayside during that time, but then I'll get it back, and then I'll be really into building the website and making my lists and really trying to be on point with the business side. But it tends to come in waves. So it's like, okay, I probably at some point it needs to be consistent on both ends all the time.
Eventually, does this mean you need to hire on some employees, your first employees? What does that look like? Have you thought about that? Is that,
Yeah. I'm like, oh God. Yes, I definitely anticipate needing help, and needing to hire. I'm not there yet. I've been so lucky to have a group of friends around me who are like, I'll help you cut. Like, I'll watch the store for a second. And they have helped me ever since the beginning. My friends have been around me. My friends and family have really supported me in that way. And I think that would be definitely a big recommendation that I have to anybody at the beginning stage of their artistic career, is like, you really need to surround yourself with other artists who understand. But yeah, in the future, I'm definitely going to need, it would be nice to have a stitcher or a sewer in the space with me. That would be my ideal, is to be able to have somebody working alongside me where I can be spontaneous with my work still, and have those extra hands in the studio. And it's just, that's tough to find.
Yeah. What, and by the way, anyone in the audience, jump in with questions. If there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand and jump in. So for someone who is a creative, I mean, any tips, best practices, or mistakes that you made, that you learned from, how to avoid, when you're something about the business side of it. On the business side of it, are there things that you did that you wish you had done differently, or things you wish you had known that you didn't know when you first started? So yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about even setting up maybe a legal entity. Should you have done it sooner or later? Like, was that something that wasn't even on your radar, or things like that?
Right from the beginning. Even when I was in the upholstery course, I wanted the name. And so I set up a business back in Maine. And so the name Maven, the label Maven, officially started in December 2015.
Oh, wow.
So it's funny, like, sometimes I'm like, I'm not a business person, but I have always kind of had the basics in my mind, and I have wanted to make it professional right from the beginning. Let's see, mistakes. I'm trying to think. I know, it's funny. I had some mistakes. They're all like so just intense stories. I bought a van off Craigslist and the engine blew within 1 month. Like, that was maybe an error, but I found a way to get out of that one. I would say I would put a lot of focus on building the relationship with your clients and realizing that they do want to hear from you. That was kind of I've always had imposter syndrome kind of deal, like where I feel like, oh, like I shouldn't be here, or they're going to find out that I don't, and that is all just a waste of headspace. So I would say that's the biggest kind of error. I wasted a lot of time not being confident in myself. And also, not realizing that people appreciate your work and they're equal, just as it's amazing that you found them it's amazing that they found you and they feel that as well. And to really like nourish those relationships, people do want your email newsletter. And I would be always like afraid to ask, like, oh, would you maybe want to get an email from me like every 6 months? And people are like, yes, because I don't want to lose track of you. And so realizing that it's an equal partnership with the people who purchase your work or support your product, and really nourishing that from the beginning and being confident in it.
I think that's the magic of, I totally know what you're saying. About 10 years ago, I attended a sales workshop. And you have this cliche of sales, it's like, we're pushing something onto someone, and the used car salesman syndrome. And then realizing, no, that's not what that's about. If you switch your mindset, it's like someone wants you have something to offer that someone really wants, and you're addressing a need or a want. And so it's you're filling each other's needs and goals. And if you look at it as a partnership in that way, a relationship in that way, it takes away all that weirdness around sales and marketing. And
and then another error that I would definitely say is to return to the pricing structure and really get that right from the beginning and have confidence in it in the beginning. Like I spent definitely the first several months not really knowing, completely undercharging, not keeping track of my time. And then as soon as I started doing job sheets, like having a piece of paper for everything I make, logging everything that I do on that piece of paper, that really kind of changed my thinking on a lot. So I feel like, especially with a lot of people working in the creative fields, we don't value our time as much because we're like, oh, well, I'm doing what I love, and like, I'm just lucky to be doing it. And it's like, at some point you're going to be like, I gotta be making 10 bags a day, like to keep, how much money do you need to be comfortable? What are your goals? Divide that by the cost of the product that you're making. How many of those do you need to make to get here? And really just kind of not letting that go or not letting that slide. That's extremely important. Your time is very valuable. You're creating something that theoretically nobody else can create because it's made with your hands. And that is something that people go their whole lives and don't even like touch that skill. That's a gift. So it's like valuing that from the beginning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So you mentioned being supported by a lot of family and friends. Were there any particular mentors that you can think of along this journey that that person? So maybe you didn't formally qualify them as a mentor at the time, but looking back, you realize the support and guidance that they provided, and that made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of people mentoring me over the years. I would say the first person that comes to mind is this woman named Jessie Sater. She had a clothing label in my college town, which was her hometown. And she was a single mom, and she had spent her younger years traveling around, following the Grateful Dead and making dresses out of curtains, which was unheard of at that time. And she was one of those early stage clothing designers. And so I saw her in the town, and I pretty much just like, I wanted to work for her so bad, just to be part of that just to watch her creativity. How is she doing this? And so I worked for her for free for years, or very little. And sometimes it would be for free. It was just this kind of, I just devoted a lot of time to what she was doing. And it really gave me those, just eyes on how this could work for somebody. And I would say at the time, like, I didn't know how valuable it was going to be. I just knew that I wanted to be around her. And I definitely drew on those experiences, and being able to be close to them. Today, I would say that a big mentor I have is honestly my partner, Abe Tokay. He is also an artist, and he definitely, having that close relationship with another artist, allows me to really, find the balance and voice a lot of concerns, and then have somebody come back to you and say that, like, okay, well, it's going to work out, and really see the kind of progression. So I really appreciate those relationships. I love to watch my friends' work grow. If I ever see, like, if I can support another artist, I do. I really try to like build these relationships everywhere and have people around me at all times. Because I want to climb the ladder with somebody. So it's like, I really want other artists to succeed around me. So I find mentors like all around, even if it's just a little like snippet of information, and I try to help mentor if I can. Like, I try to help spread the advice and be transparent and really let people know how I got here.
And I think that's so amazing. Again, like great intuition. Like, if you're passionate about something in industry, immerse yourself in it. That experience in your college town of finding that one creative person that was completely in line with your passion and what you wanted to immerse yourself in. That's amazing.
And she was she was living a very unconventional life too. Like, she ended up getting a camper and she drove it to California and sold her stuff. And I was like, oh my, I don't know anybody like that. Like, that's amazing. But
Yeah. Yes, please.
Did you notice a difference?
Oh, you know what? I'm going to throw this to you. Are you comfortable catching this? Okay.
Did you notice a difference in your customer base when moving from the road shows to a fixed location?
In East Coast versus West Coast, East Coast, I feel, was very focused on, like, I need the greatest black leather bag, and like, I need it to be very chic. I'm going to my job in New York City or something like that. And so I could really imagine these women like with these very like chic all black outfits. And so I was in that vein over there. I really felt like a little nervous to work with color. Anything that I did with color was just kind of for me as an experiment. At that time, I was starting to develop my natural dyeing skills, but those weren't the focus of my work. As soon as I moved over here, it completely blew the top off that realm. Everybody wants color and everybody wants the wildest thing. And I was just getting praised for like these neon details that I would put into things, my stitching, which has become my signature. I'll do these I call them intuitive stitching marks, because I just do them at the machine. I don't plan them out. They all kind of end up being different. And that was all just stuff I did for fun back home. And maybe somebody would be somewhat interested in it, but it maybe wouldn't be the piece they chose. And out here, it's like that has become my entire aesthetic. And I'm really thankful for that, because it's really fun to work with color. I love a great black leather bag or great brown leather bag. So I love to have those as well, but it's like, to be able to really explore the plant and insect dyeing, I have to definitely thank the West Coast for that.
Yeah. Maybe that was part of the attraction to stay, realizing that there's an opportunity there to be more creative.
Yeah, definitely. People love it. And I really appreciate that.
Crazy California.
Yeah.
Love them. Any other questions? In the audience. Yes.
Yeah, I do. I'll have a little stack of cards here at the end. I like to put a picture of one of my bags on them.
And it was a name at school. My daughter's struggling with
Yeah. Maven means someone who knows how. So that is why I chose the word. And I had always really loved that word. And then over the years that I've had it, I've really gotten all this great information from people about what the word means to them. It means expert to some, It means seeker to others. I didn't realize at the time, but it's this very multidimensional word for people. So I like to feel that I will grow into it over time. I love the kind of ambiguous definition of someone who knows how, because that's a journey that we're all on. You know, I really want to become somebody who knows how to do something. And I become that by trying all these things and breaking all the rules and really kind of going on a path with it.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Well, you're such an inspiration, Emma. Thank you so much for coming here this morning and sharing your story. Really appreciate it. And of course, just as a reminder, Emma has her store in Cayucos. So feel free to go check it out. Yeah, so good to have you. And I think, do we have slides, Madison? We're just going to jump into just like some information about what's coming next. Sorry, Madison, I just totally put you under the spotlight there for a second. So we do, well, first of all, thank you, Emma. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And yes, there is a recording of this talk that will be available online. So if anyone wants to share, the recording is on our website, sbdc.calpoly.edu. And our next coffee and conversation is in April 12th, 8:30. With Chris running. So Chris, another somewhat new person that I think also arrived during the pandemic. He was one of the co-founders of Muscle Milk, for those of you who are aware of that brand and that product. So he'll tell us a little bit about his story, and he's had quite a few different adventures in entrepreneurship. So Muscle Milk is just one of a few interesting ones. And our big annual event, AngelCon, we encourage startups to apply to be considered for investment by an investor group that we've been working with for the last 5 months. We're training investors to invest in startups, and startups can then apply to be considered for this investment. It's $100,000 or more. Actually, it is. I know for sure it's more, but we're keeping the final dollar amount a surprise. But if you know of any startups that is looking for funding, March 17th is the deadline to apply. If you have any questions around that, just don't hesitate to contact us. It's a phenomenal event. The actual event will be on June 1 at Slow Brew The Rock. And it's kind of like Shark Tank. We'll have 6 startups pitch, and the winning startup will get more than $100,000 at the end of the event. So that'll be fun. Thanks again all for being here today. Great to see some new faces in the crowd. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Have a great day.